So as Dias De Los Muertos has ended, I thought it'd be fun to analyze two different styles of storytelling that utilize the Day of the Dead as a story catalyst. Those two being the Book of Life and Coco. And this is not a new comparison by any means, but I think there's something unhelpful people do about just comparing them and seeing which is better. I think the true merit of these films is probably how they build upon each other in representing Dias De Los Muertos and the specific strategies used to accomplish that. I should also say that these two definitely aren't the first movies about Dias De Los Muertos to come out, but they are the few that have been given this large of a platform and this large of American viewership. So let's start with the Book of Life, because it came out first and it quite literally attempted to educate younger children about Dias De Los Muertos. And the way I see it, the Book of Life is, in most ways, a fairy tale. It's not really a story of great depth and imagination about a tragic character who undergoes this great enlightenment and is secretly a metaphor for anti-whatever, but that doesn't make it any less good. If anything, I think the Book of Life is at its best when it embraces the fantastical and simple story, because that's the whole premise of the movie. A bunch of children go to a field trip and learn from a strangely attractive museum assistant about the Day of the Dead, who gives them the basics. Land of the living, land of the dead, and one night a year they can pass over and visit their families. Which is a pretty good opening for a movie targeted towards American children who might not be as familiar with Dias De Los Muertos. It's utilizing a classic story being told in a story technique to level with the audience. You essentially say, hey, we know you don't know about this holiday, and that's alright, so just sit back for a moment so we can teach you. She then breaks out the authentically designed dolls when the story of Manolo, Maria, and Joaquin begins, utilizing the lens of animation to depict this fairy tale with an authentic Mexican style that you couldn't quite do in live action. And when this tale begins, we immediately know how it's going to end. The two rulers, Xibalba and Muerta, make a bet about which boy Maria will marry. And it's already pretty clear who's the good god and who's the bad god, and which boy Maria actually likes. So from the very beginning, the story structure is simple. Instead of the audience wondering who she will marry, it's more how will they get from point A to point B. The characters clearly contrast one another, with Joaquin being a fighter and Manolo being a lover, and to really throw out any sense of stakes for Joaquin, even Manolo and Maria's names sound better together because they have the same phonetic beginnings. So fast forward to when they're adults and Manolo is fighting the bull, but ultimately refusing to kill it because it's not what he or Maria want from him, signifying that Manolo, as a character, is already where he needs to be. He doesn't need to grow. Manolo just needs to be given an opportunity to prove himself to his family, his lover, which is a common protagonist trope within fairy tales. So we don't have a complicated story on our hands, and like I said, you know how this is gonna end. But that's also what makes it so great. Because the story is so simple, it allows the animation, the setting, and the holiday, because let's not forget it's about Dias De Los Muertos, to take center stage. Because only through Dias De Los Muertos could this fairy tale happen. To a certain degree, this happens with every character, but I'll focus specifically on Manolo because he's our protagonist. As I said, Manolo doesn't grow, he just needs an opportunity to prove himself to his love, his family, that he can achieve his ideals and their ideals for him through his music. And what do you know, the Day of the Dead is the one day a year that someone can tangibly interact with their living and dead family. It's also the only time of when you can go from the land of the living to the land of the dead without issue. And so Manolo's given this fateful moment to prove to everyone that he can overcome all odds through his own and get the woman he loves on this specific holiday, thus making the holiday and conflict peak and stress the importance of one another. So the world of the fairy tale could not exist without this holiday. It weaves its lovely tale within the holiday in such a way that endears the audience to them both. It's a story familiar so we can still insert ourselves, but novel in how it's told so it can engage and educate the listener about the importance of the holiday. And it ends with the museum's guides revealing themselves to be Muerta and Xibalba to show that this holiday is still important now in modern day, and why people continue to celebrate it. So in several ways, I think this movie is really good. Not perfect, of course. I think there's something weird about the music being covers of contemporary American music like Radiohead, the lack of any prominent Spanish in the film, and I don't quite understand casting Channing Tatum as Joaquin. And I'm sure that those decisions were made by executives rather than director Jorge Gutierrez, but it's still a critique that should inform future works. But I think the Book of Life created a good baseline. And in form it did, because 3 years later we got Coco, a movie not above its own problems, which I talk about in another video, so go check it out if you want, but the video's kinda bad, because I was still learning how to do this. Coco is not a fairy tale. If anything, Coco is one we would recognize as a more in-depth narrative. Miguel, our protagonist, needs to embark on a journey to grow and mature as a person, and thus conflict is more character-driven. And the film puts a lot of suspense in not knowing how this film might end, with plot twists and revelations about what's going to happen next. But despite this more complex narrative, the Dias De Los Muertos does not appear any less important. If anything, the only way that Miguel is able to grow is for Dias De Los Muertos to happen. Miguel needs to learn to connect with his family, and quite literally, he's only able to learn that on this day. In addition, our other protagonist, Hector, needs to find his way back to his family, so only through this day, where our living and past families can come together, are these two heroes able to grow and resolve the conflict. And so, this movie structure works very differently, because Miguel is the sole carrier of the conflict. Miguel does not want to compromise with his family. He's given the ability to go home whenever he wants, but he chooses not to because of his own personal desire to play music. And that desire being turned on its head when De La Cruz turned out to be a villain, which the movie treats as a reveal, shows what his selfish motivation will turn him into. A way in which he can also tangibly see. He sees the horrid and desperate state Hector is in and about to be forgotten and turned into dust. A man who did the same thing he plans on doing. And so utilizing this punishing side of the holiday, it gives a darker and more in-depth look about the importance of being remembered and keeping our connection to our family alive. Of course, this also works in Miguel's favor, because despite them chasing him all over the land of the dead, Miguel allows Mama Imelda to forgive Hector for leaving, and rediscover her love for music as well. And armed with the knowledge he learned from meeting his past family, Miguel is able to come back to the land of the living, inspire his great-grandmother's mind, which no one else in the movie has been able to do, and instill love and music in his living family. So through this holiday, Miguel and the Rivera family are able to come together and resolve this seemingly impossible conflict so everyone gets what they truly want. It's a great movie, and I think it builds upon the Book of Life's fairy tale. Instead of a tale, this story is about an actual family with a layered conflict brought together through this holiday. The cast is entirely Latinx, all the mariachi music is original and done authentically, and there's even some translation jokes when you watch the Spanish version. I do still think the movie does push a slight conform or die approach to family, because Miguel's reason for being distant and upset with his family is justified, and his growth of love isn't quite earned, which, contrary to the Book of Life, does show Manolo proving himself to his family on his own terms. Which I think is a bit better and a bit healthier message to send, but hey, no work is perfect. Which is a good way to understand these films. Neither of them is perfect, but through their solid structure, they're able to teach the audience an important lesson in Mexican culture and give a solid sense of representation to those of us that belong to said culture, which is always pretty cool. But that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching and sharing this with your friends, and I'll see you all next time.